You're welcome, Neil.
You're hard to say no to.
Thanks, DK.
Jody, I'm going to start the music, and then again, I'll fade out. You'll know when to go.
All right. I'll just zip down. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Angel City's Paralympian panel, part of the 2021 Angel City Summer Series presented by the Hartford. My name is Jody Regan, and I'm proud to be a volunteer for Angel City Sports. We've come together tonight to discuss a very interesting topic, the Legends perspective. Is the Paralympic movement heading in the right direction? We have a phenomenal group with us tonight to share their perspectives and experiences. Before we hand it over to our speakers, I'd like to make a few quick announcements. In a few moments, you will be prompted to answer a few questions that will help us better understand who our listeners are. Please respond accordingly to ensure this conversation is as productive as possible. This panel discussion will be about roughly 1 hour, with about 10 to 15 minutes for a Q&A at the end. Everyone except for the panelists will remain on mute and off video until our Q&A portion of this event. Please save your questions for the end of this session, where you will be able to write in the chat or raise your hand and we will call on you. Finally, I'd like to thank the Hartford, Fox Sports, and the United States International Council on Disabilities for supporting tonight's powerful event. Now I'm thrilled to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Candice Cable. Candice is an active native Angelino. In 1975, at the age of 21, her life took a turn that she could never have imagined. A car accident, a spinal cord injury, and paralysis of both her legs required her to use a wheelchair full-time for mobility. She became a member of the diverse disability community, traveling the world. She is a 9-time Paralympian, 12-time medalist in 3 sports, and has won 84 marathons, including 6 Boston marathons. Candice is a U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Famer. She writes and speaks on equity, diversity, access, and inclusion. She develops educational materials and training on understanding the disability experience. Candice realizes her sport platform is the perfect automatic door opener to dismantle ableism, racism, and negative stigmas disabled people experience daily. Through her writing, developing educational curriculum, lectures, video production, webinars, and coaching, Candice advocates domestically and globally for human rights and opportunities for all people, with messages of inclusion, advocacy, employment, sport diplomacy, and understanding disability as a life experience. Some of Candice's work has been with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, Open Doors Organization, UNICEF, State Department Speaker and Specialist Program, a Drunk History television episode, ADA Lead on Productions, excuse me, and Director of Paralympic and Disability Engagement on the LA 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games bid team. She attends and participates regularly with the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and Sustainable Development Goals meetings at the United Nations. Candice volunteers her time on the boards of the U.S. International Council on Disabilities, the Southern California Olympian and Paralympian Association, City of Los Angeles Mayor's Disability Commission, as well as a wheelchair racing coach for Angel City Sports. She was also an integral component of helping Angel City Sports create all of the Paralympian panels throughout the summer, and we are very grateful for all she does for us and the entire community. Please take it away, Candice.
Thank you, Jody. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming tonight and listening to us, and everybody's going to listen afterwards, because this is going to be a really fun conversation about some topics that people don't necessarily like to talk about, but we're going to talk about them because they really do relate to the Paralympic Games and Paralympic sport and athletes with disabilities and disabled people all the way around. And tonight we have a couple of people that are absolute rock stars in the disability community, and they've been active for a really long time, decades and decades and decades. And we're missing one of our panelists too, because she is not well. And I want to start off with just giving you some background on Jen Armbuster, because we were really hoping she could be here tonight and be a part of this, because goalball is one of the sports that doesn't get a ton of love from the Paralympic community, but it's one of the most exciting sports. In fact, when I first started watching it, I thought, you know, the best way to really look at this is from above. I think they should have some cameras right from above to look down on it, because you could get such an incredible perspective of the way the people have to move and the strategy with it. So Jen was a Paralympian. She competed in goalball. She's a star basketball player before her sight began to deteriorate. And Jen, after her sight deteriorated, sought out a sport that would provide her with same kind of competitiveness as basketball, and she found goalball. She was ranked as one of the top players in the world throughout her 25-plus-year career and served as the U.S. team captain since 2000. Jen was the flag bearer for opening ceremonies in the 2008 Beijing Paralympic Games, and she's a 7-time Paralympian and a 6-time member of the World Championships team. Jen has been named to many coaching staffs, as well as the 2007, 2009, and 2015 World Youth Championship delegations for the sport of goalball. Her numerous awards include Colorado Springs Hall of Fame, Amateur Athlete of the Year, Women's Sports Foundation book, 100 Superwomen, and in 2016, she retired and has since been working in the field of sports administration for almost 20 years and currently works as a Portland State University as the Inclusive Recreation and Fitness Center Coordinator. Jen is very active coaching a number of youth teams in the Pacific Northwest. And again, we're really, really sorry she's not going to be with us, that we don't have her tonight. But I know my next 2 guests are going to be ready to take up and spread the word on some of the topics that we're bringing up tonight. So my next introduction is oh, you know what? I have to say, I jumped right into this, and I didn't do my introduction of my pronouns and my audio description, as well as my land acknowledgement. And so I'm going to stop right there and go back. So y'all have to forgive me for getting so excited that I forgot to do those. My pronouns are she and her, and my audio description is that I'm a white woman with silver shoulder length hair. I'm wearing black glasses and a black turtleneck sweater. I'm sitting in front of the wall in my apartment, and behind me are several books that I think are worth reading for everyone. One is Disability Visibility by Alice Wong. The next one is Skin, Tooth, and Bone, and it's a primer for disability justice. And the third one is More Than Organs. And those 3 books are really important books when you want to learn about disability and the movement, as well as disability justice. The land acknowledgement that I want to bring forth is that I am zooming in from the Tongva Nation land in Los Angeles, which means that the Native people that were first here, this is the land that they had, and we're just renting space on it right now. So I'll move forward with Dave Kiley. Our next Paralympian is Dave Kiley. He's nicknamed DK. He was raised in Costa Mesa, California, and he lived and dreamed of becoming a professional basketball player for the Lakers. And he's still a pretty strong Lakers fan. So we might hear about that tonight. At the age of 19, he had a spinal cord injury that happened while he was inner tubing up in the mountains of Big Bear in 1973. And quickly Dave was introduced to wheelchair basketball. Wheelchair basketball and track were his first Paralympic sports in the 1976 Games. His Paralympic career included the sports of wheelchair basketball, track, and alpine skiing. DK has decades of experience as a player and as a coach in wheelchair basketball, and truly transformed the sport of wheelchair basketball through his innovative leadership, ideas, changes in wheelchair design, and visionary approach. While with the Casa Colina Condors. Dave has played in 19 national wheelchair basketball tournaments, winning 8 national titles. He was named Most Valuable Player 6 times and was selected to the National Wheelchair Basketball Tournament All-Tournament Team 17 times. Dave is also the first active player to serve as commissioner and then president of the National Wheelchair Basketball Association, and his leadership caused significant changes in the game, and he negotiated the first official partnership with the NBA and launched the NBA NWBA Wheelchair Basketball All-Star Game. Dave has 20 plus years as a junior wheelchair basketball coach in the Charlotte area. Some of his awards are Most Valuable Player for the first 50 years of sport by the International Wheelchair Basketball Association, Wheelchair Sports' highest award, the Jack Gerhardt Award, Magic Johnson and Jerry Buss Humanitarian Award. Dave was also the first wheelchair athlete to appear on Sports Illustrated. He is a trained recreation therapist. He hosts the Wheel Print podcast. He's the founder of DK 3-on-3 Wheelchair Basketball Tournament. And he's an avid fisherman and the director of a Turning Point chapter in Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Candace.
All right, next we have Leroy Moore Jr. So Leroy was a Paralympian. He was a cyclist in the 1988 Games, Seoul, Korea Games. He was born in 1967 with cerebral palsy in New York, has more than 30 years of activism, journalism, writing, lecturing on race and disability. Leroy is a published author many times over. The books are just a few to list: Black Disabled Ancestors, Black Disabled Art History 101, and graphic novel Crip Hop Volume 1, poetry books, and writes the column Illin' and Chillin' for Poor Magazine since 1990. He's created a film documentary, Where is Hope? Police Brutality Against People with Disabilities, and spoken word CDs. Leroy has started and helped organizations like Disability Advocates of Minority Organizations, to Sins Invalid, to Crip Hop Nation. And hopefully we're going to hear more about Crip Hop Nation here tonight. He's created opportunities for other artists to demonstrate their talents with the 2019 African Disabled Musicians San Francisco Bay Area Tour. Leroy has won many awards for his advocacy, from the San Francisco Mayor's Disability Council under Willie L. Brown to the recent Emmy win for co-writing the title song for the Netflix film about the Paralympics, Rising Phoenix. Leroy will be attending UCLA this fall, pursuing his PhD in anthropology. Welcome, Leroy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so, you know, one of the first things we all started talking about when we got together was, you know, how you got involved with Paralympic sport. What was the catalyst that brought you forward into Paralympic sport? You know, for me, y'all heard in my introduction that I had this spinal cord injury, and I wasn't an athlete before my accident at all. And while I was attending university after my spinal cord injury, I was really looking for people who were moving around the world using wheelchairs like me. And I needed community to really be able to bring forward what I thought I could do as a person while I was going to university. I was majoring in political science, but I immediately switched to recreation once I got involved with this group of people that were doing sports. Now, the sports that they were doing were a variety of ones, but the one that really resonated with me was wheelchair racing, and getting involved with that sport at the very beginning gave me the opportunity to meet some really influential people. I mean, one was you, Dave. I met you right away. And my first coach, Barbara Chambers. And I was inspired by them to think about competition. And I'd never, ever thought about competition in my life. And that's how I ended up getting into the Paralympic Games in 1980. From there, I started to realize that there was a lot more opportunity beyond sport to just travel and try to win things and hang out with friends and be super fit and those kind of things, is that there was opportunity to really be able to change the way people looked at disability in that time as a negative, and really try to promote the sport and make it grow. So I want to put the question to both of you is, how did you get started in your sport? And why did you want to be a Paralympic athlete? And how did it build your identity and fuel your advocacy? So there's a few questions there, but either one of you can start that off.
Dave, take it away.
All right. I'm a DK, and my pronouns are he and him, and I'm a white OG, meaning old guy, and I have a matching gray Performax shirt on to go with my hair, and I'm a spinal cord injured, and I'm sitting in my desk chair, looking at my computer, obviously, and my sweet ride Performax is sitting next to me, and I really don't have a land acknowledgement scenario going, but nonetheless, first of all, I want to thank Angel City Sports for the opportunity. What a wonderful organization, doing so much for so many people, and for the leadership and all the work to all the panels that have already transpired, and particularly this one tonight, and certainly you, Candace. You know, and anyways, how'd I, you know, I dreamt early on, you know, first it was UCLA that I wanted, you know, I wanted to be part of that regime. And then it, you know, of course, you got to leapfrog into even bigger. And as Candace said, it was a Laker dream. And it was my dream. So it's all that really mattered, as perhaps as unrealistic as it was. But you know, I went to Modern Day High School, which is kind of like it's one of the powerhouse sports programs, academic programs in the country, year in and year out. And I really excelled there, and had the opportunity to look at some college offers, San Jose State, Gonzaga, but I didn't really have any direction coming out of high school. So I really didn't follow those college of interest. And right at that point in time, you know, about halfway through my junior college, trying to figure things out at Orange Coast College in Costa Mesa, I was injured, and in the mountains of Big Bear, as Candace said. And I was transported after a couple different hospital stays to Rancho Los Amigos Hospital. And at that time, and even today, it carries a reputation with it. It housed so many wheelheads. You know, I was awestruck by all the wheelchairs when I got there, because that was not going to be me. But there was one dude that came into my room at about 6'6", you know, limping with polio, and started talking to me about wheelchair basketball. His name was Ed Owen. He's a Hall of Famer. He's no longer with us, but he really shaped my life and also inspired my direction with basketball. So that reputation from high school had already gotten to him. And so he wanted me to play. And, you know, I resisted, and, you know, because I played real basketball, you know, but make a long story short, you know, he got his hooks in me. The game got his hooks in me. I was still in a body jacket playing up in LA, the LA Stars. a white boy playing against really fast dudes with afros, inner city kind of place. And I was feeling like I was over my head, but I made a basket that game. I mean, Ed put me in a body jacket, and from there, I took off. You know, I just wanted something to distract me from me, you know, and what had happened. And basketball was always my love. So it took about a year, and I think I worked pretty hard in that year in ball, and made my first national team at about 20, 21, something like that. And then went to Stoke Manville, you know, my first experience, and then the Pan American Games in Mexico City and Bruges for the World Championships. That was all one trip, and it was my first trip. It was like, oh my God, I've never never flown, let alone, you know, now I'm going to different countries. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, yeah, I wanted to play, but you know, when 1976 came around and I made the, you didn't call it the Paralympic team. You made the US team because it was called the Olympiad for the Disabled at the time. And it was held in Toronto, not Montreal. It didn't mirror the Olympic Games as far as location, and had just an unbelievable experience. And I went there, I played basketball, and I did 4 track events, which is kind of unheard of doing anymore. You're not going to see people doing double sports. But then they were trying to maximize whoever they had, and I had the blessing of winning 5 gold medals and not even know what I was doing. You know, I didn't know how big it truly was. I was so young, so inexperienced, that I didn't know the gravity of that accomplishment, I should say.
Well, how do you think that shaped you then? Not knowing really the gravity of the accomplishment, and, you know, traveling at such a young age on an airplane. Was that your first flight ever?
Well, not I think I flew once in the 4th grade or something, you know, so, but to really travel like that, it was the first time. And the confidence I didn't have, everybody around me did. You know, all the teammates that I had that were more experienced and had been around the block, you know, I was really, as much as I was trying to learn the game, I was trying to learn life, you know, and they were really great at helping me with that struggle. You know, basketball was easier for me. It was a quick transition. The rest of it was a little more difficult, you know, and so it shaped me a lot, especially with confidence, goal setting, and you know, and playing for your country. You know, it was a big deal. So
yeah, I mean, I was the same with, you know, seeking community after an acquired disability, and, you know, and so Leroy, you were born with cerebral palsy. So you grew up with your disability, and so with the same question, you know, how did sport shape you? How'd you get involved with sport? But how did it shape you? And then the opportunity of Paralympics, what did that bring forth?
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I'm sitting in my living room. As you can see, I'm in the middle of packing to move to LA. So you see my bike, which I love. You see artwork. You see my scooter. I'm on lonely land in Berkeley, California. And yeah, so when I got involved with disabled sports, I think when Crip Camp came out, I was like, oh, I got a black side of Crip Camp because my mom took me to UCP at the time. I think I was in my early teens. I think, or even younger. And I met Beverly Jackson. Beverly Jackson changed my life. She was the only Black disabled woman that I saw that was the executive director of a whole organization. And she got me involved with Camp Harkness, and that totally changed my mind. You talking about Crip Camp? I mean, I worked at Camp Harkness. It was the best job I ever had. I worked there for, I think, 10 years. So I was first a camper, then I worked there. In the last year, I was the director of the camp. And in those years, Beverly Jackson also taught me about nonprofit, the ugly side of it, writing grants all the time, and taught me what's going on at UCP. And at the time, Bill Wilkie was the coach of the Chargers. I think our name was Chargers, the Connecticut Chargers. And I first got involved with wheelchair soccer and did track and did cycling. And the sports really, you know, I wasn't looking for Paralympics. I was looking for friends and, you know, people that look like me. So I met Mark, which we call him Sticks, because he walked with 2 crutches. So Mark, Dean, and myself and 2 other people were like the stars of the wheelchair soccer, and we just formed this male disabled bond that lasts, you know, after the Paralympics and before.
So what was the age that you were at camp, and then the year that you said 1 year you were the director?
Yeah. I think I started as a camper. I think I started as a camper when I was like 8 or 9, something like that.
Okay.
And the last year when I was the executive director, we shared me, Connie shared the executive director spot. And I think that was 1993 or something like that. Yeah.
Well, okay, so that went past your Paralympic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Paralympic debut, right?
Yeah, because I went to Seoul, Korea in 88. So yeah, I mean, like I said, you know, the Paralympics was just an icing on the cake. You know, the cake was the local sports, the competition that we had all through the East Coast. You know, Camp Harkness. I also volunteered at UCP. So, you know, the Paralympics is, I mean, it didn't fell in my lap because I trained for it, but it wasn't something that I was gunning for, you know, it just, I was there, you know, my coach saw that I liked cycling, and we just went to, you know, meets and stuff. And I competed and won, and they say, oh, you know, Leroy's one of the Paralympic cyclists. it's funny because I got to Korea and I got my ass kicked because compared to the US, all the other countries, the government paid for the cycle. So the bike was like a Lamborghini and my bike was a Pinto. I was like, Coach, look at that. It's like, there's no way. So yeah.
Well, and so that's a great point about how in the US, we are all really responsible for our own equipment and our own expenses, and had been for a really long time until the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee started to bring Paralympic sport into their fold. But before that, we all were having to come up with our own funds to be able to travel, but also create our own equipment. And lots of other countries were spending money on their athletes.
Yeah. It's, like I said, I looked at my coach, I was like, there's no way. There's no way. But I was glad to be there. Seoul, Korea was really, just flying there because I was coming from New York and Connecticut, and we stopped in San Francisco. My sister was here already. I told my sister that I'm wearing yellow, and of course, all the U.S. team was wearing yellow. So my sister's like, we took over the airport. This was before 911, so people can come in up to the gate and see us. And my sister saw all yellow, like about 500 athletes all yellow. And the only reason she saw me because I had my hair cut and I had USA on the side of my head, and I had ACDC on the other side because I'm on a hard rocker. So it was USA, ACDC on the other side. It's like, oh, that's my brother.
Oh my God! So you had ACDC on the side of your head?
Yeah, I had ACDC. Yeah, ACDC. And USA on the other side.
Oh, man. So, one of the things I'm hearing from both you and Dave and from myself was, that it helped us create our identity through the community that it created. But it also opened up our eyes to what is happening in the rest of the world, right?
Oh my God.
What other people are doing with disabilities, but also what is happening in the places that we go to for the Paralympics. In our conversation earlier, we had you were talking about, Leroy, the apartments that we all stayed in, because all three of us were in Seoul, Korea. I was a track athlete, Dave played wheelchair basketball, and you were a cyclist. And you told us about something about the apartments that I wasn't aware of happened with the apartments after we left, and how communities often get displaced when the Olympic and Paralympic Games come to town. And how do we stop that? But in one point, when I was working on the bid, I recall when the International Olympic Committee was going to come to town and look at what our idea was for the games, there was big concern about the homelessness in LA because a lot of the venues are downtown, and we have 66,000 people living on the street in Los Angeles. And so they were trying to figure out ways to hide these people. And that's not the direction we want to go, right? So tell us your story about those apartments and your thoughts.
I'll tell you about my thoughts. It's funny that I post on, this event on Facebook. And I said, I have mixed emotions being a Paralympian because the politics of the Olympics sucks, like you said, every 4 years, this big, huge animal with money comes called the Olympics, and they push out people and they build this stadium it really sticks out. You know, you go to South Korea, that you can say, you can tell it's like, okay, that's the U.S. because it sticks out. You know, so yeah, the politics of the Olympics is really, yeah, it goes against my activism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I met this Japanese disabled activist who was working at CIL in Berkeley at the time, and you know, I told her about my Paralympics in South Korea, and she's like, Leroy, I stay in those apartments. It's like they made apartments of the Olympic village. They made for low income disabled people. I was like, really? Because you know, sometimes you don't hear what happens after the Olympics. You know, it's like poof, it's just gone. You know. So when I heard that, it's like, oh, that's great. You know, that's great news because, like I said, usually, you know, in the beginning, that's all you hear is that people getting swept out just to build this stadium, just to build this, you know, complex. So you don't really, you know, hear what happens after when the Olympics leave. So when I heard that about South Korea, you know, putting those apartments into low income disabled people, I was like, oh, now that's a good way to really, you know, practice disability justice. I know we're gonna get that, you know, to practice what we speak about, because the Paralympics is more about, it is more than just sports. It is an international disability get together, you know. Mm-hmm. It's culture, it's music, it's art, it's, you know, so if we can get together with sports, then we need to get together with our politics too. So, yeah.
And, you know, so just to go a little more with Seoul, Korea, the thing I recall with it, and David chime in here anytime, is that this was the first time that I actually felt like that we were following the Olympics, that they had been in town, and that when we came, the people of South Korea were so excited to have us that they even created more opportunities for us to experience the country. And that, you know, I mean, I have to say my previous Paralympic game was 1980, and those games, well, they were starting to do the idea that the Olympic and Paralympic Games would be held in the same venues in the same city, but the Soviets, because the games were being held in Moscow, said they didn't have any disabled people. So they weren't going to hold the Paralympic Games. And our games were in Arnhem, Holland. And so my previous games was one where I was told that there was disabled people weren't in a country, which seemed really odd, but that, you know, we were going to be moved over to this group. But with the games in Seoul, it really felt like they had created a real opportunity to elevate us and celebrate us more so than I'd experienced in the past.
You know, I'll just say this, and I'll leave it be. But you know, like about 10 years after that South Korea Olympics, I read an article in the New York Times. I was like, oh my God. And they reported that, you know, during the Olympics in South Korea, is that they took a lot of houseless people and disabled people and put them in like camps in the village. So we athletes wouldn't see them. so I was like, wow, There was a big article and they talked about how they did that, for like the year before the Paralympics and Olympics went to Seoul, Korea. So that's what I thought, because when I was in Seoul, Korea downtown, I was like, these streets are so clean.
Uh-huh.
You can have a picnic on the streets. It's like, so, reading that article, it's like, oh, okay, So, yeah. Once again, the politics of the Olympics is a strange bit of those,
Well, so my feeling that we were that we were being celebrated and elevated was actually the opposite, because they'd moved out all their own disabled people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, so in the wake of the Paralympic Games, there's been some paradigm shifts, definitely, in that area. I mean, before the mid 20th century, disabled people were either killed or eradicated or put into institutions. By 1960, we were starting to come out. And so that's when people started to really look at people with disabilities. But before that, we were playing sports. 1948 was the first so-called Paralympic Games that they held in Stoke Mandeville. And that was focused on rehabilitation, right? That was a rehabilitation piece, that soldiers were coming back from World War II, and they thought that sport would be a really great opportunity to help people get healthy again and rehabilitate them. And then the Olympic Games came to London, and they thought, well, let's have our own games here at Stoke Mandeville, the rehabilitation hospital just outside of London. And that really was the start of international games for people with physical disabilities. People with intellectual disabilities were already starting to have games with the Special Olympics, and people that were deaf. And so there were three groups that were starting to have games that were changing the ideas around disability and shifting the paradigm. So now I know that, Dave, you've been to multiple Paralympic Games, and Leroy, you went to Seoul, Korea, and I've been to some Paralympic Games. Are there times that you've noticed a real paradigm shift in the way that someone with a disability is perceived in a more positive light, or that sport has really changed the narrative in a positive, uplifting way as the games have moved forward? I mean, for me, I think about 1984 when we had the exhibition event in LA, because that was the first time we really got any kind of real broadcast publicity where the world saw us. That felt like a paradigm shift. In other games, are there things that the two of you can think about that really shift the paradigm from the negative stigma that surrounds disability to a more positive one through sport?
Well, just looking back at my path or wheel print, getting hooked on the Paralympic Games in 1976. Well, no, excuse me, because they were not called the Paralympic Games.
Right.
They were still figuring out the name and the Olympiad for the disabled. And I don't know if that carried on into Arnhem, but nonetheless, I've seen it all really across to now, from the movement of when, facilities were weak, crowds were weak, 76 and 80. And at that time, even in our own organization, we were battling over, the athlete was being charged for every expense. We had to raise money for everything we did, plus build our equipment was a given. You just had to take care of that yourself. but you know, travel and food and was coming straight out of our pockets. And so by the time I had completed Arnhem and was moving towards 84, myself and another well-known and valuable key basketball player, Curtis Bell, we said, we're not going, you know, and we were in our prime in terms of our career of basketball, and said, we're not going unless the organization does something about the paying, you know, raising funds. You know, you can't just keep taking the easy way out and charging athletes, you know, and that's a huge paradigm shift in itself, because today, you know, an athlete, he certainly gives up time and maybe some vacation pay or time or whatever, but they're being reimbursed. Everything is covered. And I think it's pretty beautiful, you know. But in 84, it wasn't so beautiful, you know, because we didn't win the gold medal, and we could have. You know, I look at it as I had to do it, and I also look at it as a regret, because I became a gold medal monger. You know, I wanted more. Once I got one, I wanted more, but yet, you know, sometimes you have to give it all up. There's things that are bigger than just winning, you know, and so to see where we're at today, and we're a long ways from perfect. Perfect's not the word, but you know, we're battling now for equity versus equality, right? And so things are changing slowly but positively, I think. And yes, with all the media attention, everything that you see on the television, you can't go throughout a day and not see something on the Paralympics or something in advertising. You know, we were in a dark, you know, in the corner kind of place, 76 through 84. And then you walked into the opening ceremonies of 88 in Seoul, Korea, and you got your mind blown with 100,000 people. That was a first. That was a first. And we didn't even expect it. We didn't know it was going to happen that way. It's like you come through the tunnel and oh my God, you know. So definitely 88 was a paradigm in terms of people seeing us and respecting. I think once they understood, hey, these folks got game, you know, of all different kinds, not just ball. I mean, you know, from whatever sport it was, they appreciated it. And to play in front of that many people was where it was at.
Yeah, I like to pick up on that. It's true. I mean, 88 was, you know, 88 was my first and ever Olympics, but just, you know, like you said, they coming out that tunnel and seeing all those people, I was like, holy crap, you know. And, you know, and just traveling and seeing the USA team take over the whole airplane. I mean, you took over the whole airplane, you know. And I also like to see is that we're making progress compared to, because now I'm a musician, so I'm bringing the, you know, what Crip did with the movie, you know, I was in Phoenix, and you know, the director came to me and he said, "We want to work with disabled musicians." You know, that didn't happen in London. London, they had Public Enemy, they had all these big rap stars. They didn't have a disability, you know. But you know, Rising Phoenix came to us. It's like, you know, we want to work with disabled hip hop artists, and I think that's a shift too. You know, because you know, it's not only we're the athletes, but we're the art, we're the talent that could be on stage performing. You know, usually get like big stars to attract people, but the big stars don't have disabilities. So, I think that was a cultural shift that just happened. The director, reaching out to hip hop and being involved in that.
Yeah, the culture shift that you both mentioned about the awareness, right? And also the exposure. But Leroy, you also said there was an article that came out how they swept away all these disabled people that live locally. They wanted the shiny object of the athletes, right, from all over the world to come in and show how wonderful it was, which kind of, takes us into the idea of inspiration porn, is that we're there to make people feel better about themselves sometimes. But sport does have the power to be able to shift culture and perspective, of which we have seen and both of you have articulated. And it also has a real opportunity to push and develop our rights. And, because in the 1960s, when they created the Civil Rights Act, people with disabilities were left out of that. We didn't get our own Civil Rights Act until 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act. I mean, before that, there was the Rehabilitation Act 504 in the 70s, but that really only meant if you were federally funded, you had to create accessibility, right? And then with the human rights documents that were created in 1948, the very first ones, people with disabilities were again left out of that. And so the next human rights document came in 2008 with the Convention on Rights for Persons with Disabilities, which was probably the most comprehensive human rights document ever written to this day. The CRPD really includes everyone. And so people with disabilities have been left out of so many rights act. So we have our civil rights pieces that are in place, but we don't really have great enforcement. But if right?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, the enforcement piece, and I really want to push this over to you, Leroy, because we have two things that we're working with in our disability community that are really critical, that they run a twin track. Or actually, for me, disability justice is the one that's got to be the lead now, because we have to put people that are the most marginalized in positions of leadership and put them outspoken. And so I know that either Josh or Camille is going to put a slide up for us about disability justice, but help us understand the difference between disability rights and disability justice.
Yeah, well, I like to shout out, the founders of disability justice, Payburn and Sims and the Valid, because, those are the people and myself at the time got together, and, we were all people of color, queer, transgender, straight. We all said that, we acknowledge, the disability rights, we acknowledge the ADA, we acknowledge our elders who did that. But we also saw that that people of color, transgender, queer people were not only left out, but outside of the courtroom, because we don't live in courtrooms. So outside the courtrooms, what's the theory that we can live by? So that's when you have disability justice, and you see the 10 principles that Payburn and a lot of early Sims and Valley people put together. Talking about how we can move together as one. Cross movement. Recognize wholeness. We're not separating our race or disability, our queerness or disability. interdependence, you know, compared to independence, you know, because we all say that, you know, we have other people too, you know, families, you know, loved ones. So we're really not independent, we're interdependent, access, and yeah, we have access because of the law, but we're talking about access in like meetings, if you want, people to really get what's happening in a meeting, what's their access needs? Do we need to slow down, or do we need sign language interpreters? Do we need large print? So, access needs is more than just a physical building, and collective liberation, moving together, which is, we bumped into this constantly because once we were going out to dinner, and one person, could not deal with the air conditioner, other people needed to be hot. So it's like, what do you do in that situation? So it's really, communication all the time and making sure that, like you said, Candace, that we, the most oppressed have a voice, and we're making our own table. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we are totally, appreciative of the disability rights movement, but we also know that in our communities, people of color, need a theory or something to grab onto so they can, really understand, disability awareness and disability pride, from their culture. And I think that's what this disability justice does. And I'll close it just once again to shout out the original thinkers of, Patty Byrne and Mia Mingus, and myself, and other people who sat around and made up disability justice.
And put it forward, created this narrative for people to be able to follow and understand and learn, because for someone like myself, a white individual that, for the first 21 years, I was a non-disabled person. I never even thought that I was living in a society that I was the privileged one. I had the opportunities that were created so that I would succeed, and that there were systemic systems that were put in place so that others would not succeed. And only after my disability did I begin to understand that. But we're seeing people now understand more clearly, little by little, that our entire system is set up so that certain people are successful and other people aren't. And it's about value, right, Leroy? It's about who is valued and who isn't.
Yeah, recognizing your privilege. When I used to have my own nonprofit back in the 90s, we did what's called the other side of the ADA rally. And, being in July now, we're talking about ADA 31. But if you look at the cover of the ADA, and I used to put on the picture who is missing from this picture. Mm-hmm. And you see the cover of the ADA, you see it's right there, point blank. It's like, you had George Bush and other people, but people of color was missing from that picture. So once again, disability justice is, trying to not only fill the holes, but really take it beyond and really, give the voice of people of color, people that are queer, people that are transgender, to really step up in their original bodies, their original mind, and say, here we are. And we were a part of the ADA, although we were in the picture, activists, Latino activists was there, Black disabled activists was there, so yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think about how we learn and change and try to educate each other within our disability community on what opportunities are, because it's almost like we have a line within the sports community where we talk about like, hey, this is happening, did you hear about it? And this is happening over there, did you hear about that? And we share that within the community around disability with the concept of disability justice. There's this piece of, I don't know, it's inclusion of everyone and understanding that we all need to participate to really create a world that creates opportunity for everyone. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I push back a little bit because it's not inclusion. It's like we've already been here.
Okay.
So we're not acting on inclusion. If you look at the story of Moses had a disability. So we disabled people have been here since Moses. So it's not. It's for me, and probably I'm radical, but it's not including. It's telling the public to do their work, because the public has to do their homework to really uplift what Moses and our laws and everything has been saying. So it's really up to the community to do their work. I mean, disabled athletes have been here. Disabled artists, activists, authors have been here. We've always, come with a closed door. So it's time to blast those doors wide open.
I agree, man. I think, disabled athletes are good people, but they're really self-centered, and it's about what is the sport, what can I get, who's going to sponsor me, how many likes am I going to get? We have to spread the responsibility of understanding civil rights, social injustice, discrimination, racism, and I do a podcast and I have mostly Paralympic athletes on, but I always allow, I'm going to make them uncomfortable with some questions if need be. How are you being part of the solution to change social injustice? Or, how have you dealt with discrimination, or the inequities in sport, able versus disabled. So I love the direction though, and the movement of the Paralympics right now. I think we're moving, we have a long way to go to get to the equitable side of things, but it is changing. I mean, Becca Murray just won an ESPY. There's evidence that social media, the media itself, is starting to pay attention to the Paralympic athlete, and so that I'm pretty grateful.
Well, Dave, tell us about Becca Murray. Tell us who you're talking about.
Well, Becca Murray's in my mind, the best female wheelchair basketball player of all time, and
Okay.
my own experience and a little bit prejudiced. And in my book too, she's one of the best shooters I've ever seen, even better than most men. And nonetheless, she was nominated for an ESPY, and she'd been in the national team program for she seemed like a decade and a half or better, couple decades, I don't know, but and she won the ESPY, and it's a proud moment for at least wheelchair basketball and I think disabled athletes. But the fact that we're in that situation now where every year there's a nomination for a person with a disability to win an ESPY, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I really think, especially now, is that the sports arena really has to face their own image. I mean, you have the tennis player, the pro tennis player, her Netflix, film is incredible. Talks about depression and, mental health. And, you have, I think this other disabled Paralympian that had to drop out because of lack of accessibility. She could not bring her personal care attendant, so, all these stories are just, happening now. A lot of, not a lot, but some of the athletes are just, backing out of the Olympics and Paralympics because of a lack of accessibility and because of the pressure that they feel.
Right.
So I think the sports arena has to open out and really do some, disability, training or disability education, because it's not going to stop. I mean, we see that this year in the Olympics, because athletes are just pulling out because of the stress level and mental health level, and you put COVID on top of it. It's like, it's just off the wall. Yeah.
Well, and so the point that you're bringing forward about the level of ableism within both Paralympic and Olympic sport. I mean, that swimmer that has chosen to drop out because the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee wouldn't let her have her personal care attendant, her PCA, with her, because they said, well, we have a coach that we're calling a PCA, and a PCA is not a coach.
No.
A personal care attendant is someone who's helping you beyond the sport part in other areas, whether it's navigating the dining hall or getting to and from practice, and so, they have 17 different blind athletes that would be using that one coach / PCA during those games. And it's almost impossible to keep people actually safe with that. And
Candace, doesn't that go against the UNP on disability?
Yeah, I mean, the Convention on Rights for Persons with Disabilities, nobody's brought that in to really push it. And I think it's because of the level of ableism within our sports organizations of wanting to force Paralympians to be like their non-disabled counterparts, the Olympians. Yeah. And that's not who we are. I mean, that's not who we want to really begin to even close emulate. I mean, we all do sports, but the truth is that we've lived in a country, and thank you for putting up this definition of ableism, but we live in a world even that places value more value on some bodies than other bodies. I mean, this right here definition comes from T.L. Lewis, and it's actually one of my favorite definitions of ableism.
T.L. Lewis kicks ass.
Yeah, is that yours too? Yeah. And I mean, it's the one I share everywhere, and I'll read it. It's a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on a societal construct, ideas of normality, intelligence, excellence, desirability, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's language, appearance, religion, and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. And you do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. So, I mean, I'm gonna, like a perfect example is Naomi Osaka, and her deciding that her mental health was more important than participating in the French Open press tours. And you're required to participate in those press tours because they're paying the athletes to be there, and they shouldn't be required to do something that could put them in distress or harm them, you know, mentally. Because as we're seeing with Simone Biles right now, she decided to step away from that competition for the day because, and then go into the next one, because she knew she wasn't fully mentally in the game and she would hurt herself. And she's getting a lot of criticism from people for doing that. And people shouldn't be getting any criticism for taking care of their mental health.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, you know, the sports arena, I think the sports arena and the music industry, both industries are not involved with this new racial justice, disability, inclusionary wave that's going on now. You know, we see it in Hollywood, we see it in tech, but we don't see it in sports and we don't see it in the music industry. So yeah, I think it's really up to us to really push it. Yeah.
Well, and it's us to educate. You know, that's exactly what Angel City Sports is doing here with this panel and all the other panels that they put together. Is they're starting to educate little by little about these issues, and then how do we make a difference? How do we create change? How do we be responsible for taking care of each other, right? Because we're all in this together. And Paralympic sport, and if we think about like, where's Paralympic sport going? For me, Paralympic sport has a real opportunity to shift that narrative into a social justice narrative in multiple ways, should they choose to go in that direction. And we're seeing some of that happen with the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, where they've created a council on social and racial justice. It's a brand, you know, it's new, and they're coming up with concepts and ideas. One was athletes are able to protest now about issues at competitions in the United States. And there was just an international letter that was sent out all over the world to say that the rules that the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee have against protest should be amended. And I see athletes leading the way like that. What about you two?
And you know, not only athletes, but I think it needs to be open to having disabled sportscasters. You know, having disabled analysts on what's that sports
on NBC.
You know,
or ESPN.
ESPN's a disabled sportscaster. You know, the New York Times just hired a disabled reporter to do disability issues. I think the same thing should happen to ESPN. They should have, especially during the Paralympics, I think they should have a disabled sportscaster.
Well, we have had, there have been a few, but honestly, their disabilities have been hidden.
Yeah, exactly.
And I honestly think that for the Olympic Games, they should have people with disabilities that know the sports, also sportcasting, because they have them during the Paralympic Games, people without disabilities, the sportscasting. So why not both? I mean, one of the things I'm pretty excited about that I think is going to be a paradigm shift in Paralympic sport is what Toyota brought forward in the American athletes that made the Paralympic team for Tokyo as well as Beijing. Every one of them are getting $10,000 to support their efforts. And they're not giving it to Olympic athletes because it's almost, they haven't said it like this. It's just me saying it, but it feels a little bit like reparations. It feels a little bit like that to me, is that they're trying to level up the field, right? Because they know that society is focused on the non-disabled athlete fully and completely as that's the way it's supposed to be. When we know that athletes come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, and that sport evolves and changes and is it, you know, I heard Keith Jones say once about and you guys are partners with Crip Hop Nation, is that sport brings a humanity to the world and a connectedness that can then use that opportunity to be able to push these uncomfortable conversations that we've put off for too long.
Yeah. I mean, look at the women's basketball team. It took them years to get to this stage, and they're still not at the stage where the NBA is at, so yeah.
Right. Well, I think we have about 10 more minutes, and I know there's been some questions.
Yeah.
So either Josh or Camille, because I am not seeing the chat. You might have to help us with questions, or Jody.
I've got them. I've been writing them down, keeping track.
All right, thank you.
So you're welcome. Let me go back to the beginning. There was one, unfortunately, Alan had to leave us, but he asked, do you think should Paralympics run concurrently to the Olympics and be included in the overall medal table?
That's an interesting one. I'm not quite sure I know what that means.
I think he's meaning should the games be concurrent with the Olympic Games, and should all the medal count for both should be one medal count?
Oh, is it? Do you think that should they happen together?
I think that's what he was. Unfortunately, he's not on the call anymore, but I think that's how I read it.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, if you want a monster, try to do something like that. I mean, the logistics separately are beyond our wildest imagination. We can't even fathom. So to me, though the intent might seem like great inclusion, but I don't know that the two largest sporting events in the world could be collective like that, just logistically.
Right.
We had another question from Jen. How do we help the larger community move past the curiosity for the disability story and focus on the athletic performance? Is this something we should prioritize?
Yeah, I think so. I think the way you move beyond it is you hire more disabled people. I always think, I brought up the New York Times. That's when you go beyond solidarity statements, and you put your solidarity statements into program, in your program. So the New York Times said, okay, we'll hire a disabled reporter. That's going above just writing a solidarity statement. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with Leroy on that one. The authentic lived experience of a person with a disability who's an athlete. There's a whole lot more going on, and media really likes to focus on one piece of it, and and they do that in the Olympics too. This kind of a little sensational or personal heart tug story, and I think having more people that have authentic lived experience creating those stories are going to show the wide range of humanity that disability is, because disability is a life experience we're all going to have. I mean, nothing else aging is going to get you. So, it's it's one of those things that it's a part of life.
And then Josh asked, what is one thing you would say to someone, or what is one thing you would say someone should do or try to help take the next step towards another paradigm shift in the Paralympic movement?
I would like to say that it is to focus what happens after the Olympics. Because we saw some drastic changes in London after the Olympics. After the Olympics, oh God, the conservative government got in power and destroyed disability services. So, yeah, we had the Paralympics. Well, what's going to happen after it? What's going to happen to disabled life after the cameras are gone?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the thing for the next paradigm shift is something that I saw in London was education, like real education in society and schools about disability, the different types of disabilities, interacting, how to create access, inclusion, and what are the real needs that we have, because so often people are telling us what we need, and it's not that's not the answer. I also think that, again, I'm going to say it, the same thing again, is that people with disabilities need to be in leadership positions. They have to be in positions of making decisions about things, because that's going to change the paradigm.
Well, education, to get to a paradigm shift, I think we also have to have the responsibility of knowing our history, to know the ADA, to know our civil rights. And I really think that's a missing link, broad spectrum for people with disabilities. We have to push that agenda of responsibility, is that you have a voice, but you have to educate yourself. And I haven't always been that way. This is something I've taken on later in life. I was that guy that just wanted his goodie basket filled, right? And but I realize today that there's so many more important issues to overcome and to deal with, and how other the social injustice and the racism is causing such division. And here we are talking about how many baskets you made, so I think we have to learn more about, our rights. And as I said, not to repeat myself, it's educating people at large over what we're faced with.
Yeah, well said.
That was the last question that was in the chat. If anybody has anything they want to say, they can raise their hand and ask a question, or that might be it.
I just want to say quickly that also the disability community has to get out of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I was blessed to be on the Edge of Sports. It's the #1 sports radio program from Zion. Oh, man, that's his name. But anyway, he's like the #1 sportscaster, you know, and he, you know, I brought the issue of the Paralympics to him, and he said, yeah, let's do it. So I think we, disabled community need to step out of the comfort zone and really push these big companies. I think that NBC is hosting the Paralympics. If I get that right, NBC. So I think you know we should continue to push these companies outside of our comfort zone to do what's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you know, as disabled people, we have to learn how to self-advocate. You know, as you said, get out of our comfort zone. Dave, as you said, we have to educate ourselves on what the rights are and things and be able to articulate those, because we can't, you know, really ask for rights we don't even understand if we don't have them. And advocating for ourselves and our own health and wellness, when we saw great examples by Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka recently in mental health areas, because having a disability in the world that we live in now is exhausting oftentimes, because we're constantly pushing to get in, be a part of, have a voice in things. And so learning how to self-advocate and take care of ourselves at the same time, and then build that community of advocacy. I personally feel like as a group, we're so much more powerful. And it's one of the things that I have always appreciated about my athletic career and the community that I built within that, of the people that I met through my sports, that I've continued to have in my life and connect with and do things with, that community sustains me. And in the disability community, we're really siloed in a lot of ways. And we really have to, I feel like we have to break those down so that we can be able to shift and dismantle those things that you mentioned about, David, and racism and ableism. And then, you know, finally, I want to thank Angel City Sports and the two of you and everybody involved with this for participating tonight, because without your voices and the continued things you bring forward, people won't know, you know, they just won't know what they need to know. And you know, you don't know until you know, right?
Well, thank you. Thank you for providing such insights. This has really been a powerful conversation. We're pretty much just at the end of our time. Want to thank everyone for attending. Thanks again to Candice Cable, DK Kiley, and Leroy Moore for sharing your experiences and also giving us action items to go out and be able to make a sustainable change. I'd also like to thank again the Hartford, Fox Sports, and the United States International Council on Disabilities for supporting tonight's powerful event. Please join us this Thursday for our final Team USA training and tactics sessions on the summer from 4 to 6 p.m. We'll be featuring seated throws, powerlifting, and judo. And our final Angel 5K check-in before the big race on August 7th. So thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Leroy. Thanks, Candace, Camille, Josh.
Good luck coming to LA.
Hey, baby, yeah. For the World Series, I hope.
Yeah.
All right, peace.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.